Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a really fascinating theological idea, the concept that the divinity is a single, indivisible spirit. It's a view that challenges some pretty common ways of thinking about God, and it all kicks off with one central, powerful question. This whole thing really boils down to this. Can there be different centers of knowing, different minds, inside of God? Like, could the Father know something the Son doesn't? Or the other way around? According to the source material we're looking at today, how you answer that question, well, it changes everything. And let me tell you, the stakes here are seen as incredibly high. The author of our source material pulls no punches, straight up calling the idea of separate minds within the divinity a dangerous argument. But why? Why dangerous? What's the big risk? That's exactly what we're going to unpack. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get into why our source calls this common belief dangerous. Then, we'll see how it rereads some key passages from Scripture. After that, we're going to explore this really cool analogy that's at the heart of the whole argument. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways. Okay, first up, let's tackle that dangerous idea. We really need to get why our source is pushing back so hard against what is, for many, a very familiar way of thinking about God. So the specific belief that's being put under the microscope is this one. The idea that the Bible describes distinct persons within the Godhead who are talking to each other, sharing information, almost like a heavenly board meeting. You've probably heard verses explained just like this. And right here, this is the danger. Our source argues that if you have distinct persons with their own separate minds and their own separate consciousness, then you don't actually have one God. If you follow that logic all the way, it says you land on a belief in three gods. And that's called thritheism. For the author, that's a theological line you just can't cross. So if that's the risk, what does this viewpoint do with the parts of the Bible that really sound like they're describing multiple persons in the divinity? Let's get into the evidence and see how our source suggests we rethink what Scripture means by persons. The whole debate really crystallizes right here. The common view sees distinct persons who are sharing knowledge, but this other view, the one from our source, says no. What we're actually seeing is one indivisible spirit that expresses itself through different functions. It's a subtle shift, maybe, but the implications are huge. Let's look at a classic proof text, Matthew 11:27. When you first read it, it absolutely sounds like two different individuals, right? Each one has exclusive knowledge of the other. No one knows the Son except the Father. It seems pretty clear. But our source says, hold on, let's look at this through a different lens. This isn't about two minds having a private chat. It's actually a profound statement about how God chooses to reveal himself. The Father, that's God in his essential invisible nature, is made known through the Son, which is God's visible expression in the flesh, in Jesus. You can't know one without the other because they aren't separate beings. They're two sides of the same coin. Okay, here's another big one from the book of Romans. On the surface, it seems to describe two different actions by two different agents. You've got the Spirit interceding for us, and then you have someone else, he who searches hearts, who knows what the Spirit is thinking. This really seems to point to two distinct players. Yet again, though, the source interprets this as a difference in function, not a difference in person. It's describing two jobs being done by the one and only Spirit of God. Think of it this way. God's Spirit is at work in us, shaping our prayers. And at the same time, God, who is that Spirit, perfectly understands those very prayers. It's not one being talking to another. It's one Spirit doing two things at once.
This all leads us to what is, I think, the most brilliant part of this entire explanation. This is the part that makes it all click. It's the man and spirit analogy.
The whole thing is built on this simple yet profound question from 1 Corinthians. Who knows a person's thoughts? The answer is just obvious, right? Only you. Only your own spirit, your own consciousness. The verse then takes that exact same undeniable logic and applies it directly to God. So here's the absolute linchpin. Just think about yourself for a second. You and your spirit, your mind, your consciousness, you aren't two separate people having a conversation, are you? You don't debate yourself as if you were two different entities. You are one single integrated being. And this just nails the argument. The source concludes that in exactly the same way you and your spirit are one and the same, God and his spirit are one and the same. The Spirit of God isn't some separate person from God. It is God's own consciousness, his mind, his essence. It's how God is self-aware. All right, let's bring it all home. In our final section, One God, One Spirit, we're just going to summarize the key takeaways from the source material we've been walking through. So, to boil it all down, first, the core argument is that the divinity is one single, indivisible spirit. Second, terms like Father and Son aren't different people, but rather different roles or ways that one God reveals himself. Third, when the Bible talks about the Spirit searching God, it's just a powerful metaphor. It's like your own mind knowing your own thoughts. And finally, the whole point of this perspective, its main motivation, is to avoid what the source sees as that dangerous slide into believing in multiple gods. And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on, a final thought-provoking question. We're not here to answer it for you, but just to leave you with this. If you accept this argument that God is a single, indivisible spirit, how might that change or maybe even deepen your understanding of what it means to have a personal relationship with God? It's a pretty big thought. Thanks for joining us for this Explainer.